make a start, and if people are late, they'll just come in. Thank you everybody for coming on a very lovely and beautiful Saturday afternoon. I'll start by honouring the traditional custodians of this land, the Wicca people, and the ancient spirits of the land that were formed when the land was formed and are still living and holding us today. And that's how I like to start, just to acknowledge where we are, the spirits of the land here. Thank you. Okay, so this is, as I keep saying, it's a niche topic of a niche topic. So the Golden Dawn is not a particularly well-known spiritual tradition as far as spiritual traditions go, and the aspect of the goddess within the Golden Dawn is even less well-known. So it's amazing there's anyone here at all. So thank you for being here. Many of the people here I know, some people I don't know, so I don't know how much people know about the Golden Dawn itself. Whenever I say Golden Dawn, people think of that nasty political party in Greece, and that's all they think of. Who doesn't know much about the Golden Dawn? There's a few people. Great. Okay. So we'll do a little bit on that. So I just don't want to labour it too much. If other people, hopefully this will be coming from a slightly different perspective. Okay. So the Golden Dawn. So the Golden Dawn was a group in Victorian England up until just before the Second World War, practicing Western magic. Magic in the sense of practices and spiritual techniques and methods and paradigms designed to unlimit us, to quote one of the Golden Dawn adepts, Florence Farr. He said, magic is designed to unlimit us. So the idea of the Golden Dawn was to unlimit the person into greater unfoldment to become one with the divine God, goddess. So we saw that. So it's established in 1888 from a group of Masons who decided to actually create an order within their group that would work a bit more deeply with the Western tradition of magic. And it was a very successful order as far as these things go, being a secret order, and many luminaries of the day, like W.B. Yeats, for example, E. Nesbitt, Florence Farr, Maud Gonne, the creator of the world's most popular tarot deck, Fixie Coleman Smith, and other people like that. So a lot of very interesting, very influential people, and also it itself became the backbone for most of the Western esoteric magical practices for the next 120 years, right up until today. So that's a brief overview of the Golden Dawn. It was not something that you would find if they had an internet back then, which they didn't. They did have notices in newspapers and things. You wouldn't find it there. You would find it obliquely referenced in obscure spiritualist and theosophical journals. That's where there were oblique references to the Golden Dawn. Because a secret organisation that's completely secret, of course, can't get new people in, so therefore it wouldn't last long. So there has to be some form of porous connection, and that's how they did it, and friends of friends. So the Golden Dawn was essentially a method of transformation, what in Christian terms would be called theosis, an ongoing participation in the divine, leading to union with the divine. That was the aim of the Golden Dawn. It was organized very tightly around and it was called an outer order, where theoretical study and ceremonial initiation. So you didn't just roll up and start attending like we're attending here. You had to go through an initiation which prepared you and made you ready to receive the information and the techniques that you'd be given. So there was an outer order, which is largely theoretical, with a few lectures and meditations, and then an inner order, where you practiced the magic and the high techniques of meditation and invocation and other processes that would aid theosis, like union with the divine, participation in union. So very tightly arranged between inner and outer order. These days the inner and outer order blur a lot because a lot of it's being published and a lot of people now are trying to run before they can walk, and a lot of people are doing inner order stuff quite early on. But originally, very, very tightly arranged. So the idea, I keep stressing about the Golden Dawn, wasn't magic in terms of trying to get a better job or a better lover. It was magic in the sense of unlimiting us, because we are unlimited beings made in the image and likeness of God. That was the idea of the Golden Dawn.
And does it still exist?
Yes, the Golden Dawn still exists. There's debate about whether it is a continual handing on from one group to another, what would be equivalent of apostolic succession, which you would be familiar with. So there's debate whether one group died and then it was published and then people restarted it like a reformation, or whether there has been a handing over in secret. All we can say on that is if there has been an handing over, it has been in secret, and therefore it's outside of the realm of academic discipline and discourse and trying to find out. So if it has been, it's completely secret. We can't talk about it because it's secret. But a lot of groups, since a book called The Golden Dawn was published between 1937 and 1940 with Israel Regardie, and there's been numerous books since, books published on the broader topic of the Golden Dawn from about 1980s onwards. So there's been a revival, but most of those revivals are coming from the published material. Very few come from non-published sources. Some do, but not many. Yeah. So it still exists. Yeah.
Does it still exist in Perth?
Oh, that's a well, there could be 5 Golden Dawn temples in Perth now, secret we wouldn't know about. There are people working the Golden Dawn in Perth now, yes. There are people working. Yeah.
Why do they need to keep it secret? I mean, it's a spiritualism of unlimiting us, so surely...
Magical secrecy is really, it's a whole lecture, but in a nutshell, what's kept secret isn't information that would necessarily aid anybody, because it's all out there. There's a saying about the Masonic secrets, for example, that they could be shouted from the street, shouted from the top of buildings in the corner street, and people still wouldn't get it. So what's kept secret are the symbols and the words and the images that are particular to the particular group, that enables them to have a personal connection with the divine. Okay, that's all that's kept secret. The actual techniques are not kept secret. So, for example, my book details techniques and the inner workings of those techniques. That's out there. That's all non-secret. So what is kept secret is stuff that makes the magic work. It's kind of like in a page, you circle a word or a phrase that's very important. So we say, this is very important to us. We will keep that secret. There will be a boundary of that. It will not enter the common discourse. And in the same way, Masons, and all the secrets of Masonry are out there. But if you ask a Mason the word or the handshake, they won't talk about it. They know it's out there. But by not talking about it, it becomes something special. It becomes something divine, or a way of accessing the divine. So it's like circling the word on the paper. So that's why there's still magical secrecy. It's not to stop anything going out to the public at all. Yeah. So, but it's a whole lecture, and maybe I should do a lecture on that. It's a wonderful topic. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Okay, so that's the Golden Dawn. Okay. Now, when I started raising... Yes, thank you. When I started talking about this on the internet and Facebook, about the goddess and the Golden Dawn, a few of the more well-known people started talking about it as well, Pasewalski, for example, and he was talking about, for example, the tarot, which a lot of it comes from the Golden Dawn, modern tarot, about how there's gender balance between the suits. There's male and there's female. As he said, there's gender balance. I have a more audacious thesis. My audacious thesis is that the Golden Dawn works because of the feminine power within it. Okay? So it's not about gender, necessarily about gender balance. I think it only works because of the high feminine goddess nature within it. So, and Argument by authority. This is the words of Tony Fuller, one of the few real scholars of the Golden Dawn, and still a practitioner as well. And this was just recently on Facebook. The role of the feminine is not merely important, but paramount. Absolutely paramount. And if Tony Fuller is saying this, then, I mean, he has access to more of the archives of the traditional Golden Dawn orders and papers, and as I said, he's still a practitioner of high repute. If he's saying it, there's an argument by authority. It's not just me saying it. Paramount. It is what makes the Golden Dawn work. Okay? So it's not just a question of balance. I want to stress that. Okay, so if we're going to talk about gender, goddess, God, we're in the gender thing. So we have to talk about what I mean and what I understand by gender. So gender, we have to be very careful when we start talking about goddess and God, that we are not taking what we know as attributed to the male and to the female from our society and throwing them onto the divine. So this is very easily done if we have a dualistic understanding of the divine, like Wicca, where you have a gentle goddess and a fierce god, a life giver and a life taker. These things we can easily, if we're not careful, because our society teaches us as this blue and pink, boys are active, girls are passive, all these messages we get all the time, constantly. If we're not careful, we project that out into the divine realms, and our deities are seen as representing these attributed characteristics that are not essential. So if anyone's done any reading across anthropology and history, you will know that there is very few things that we can say are attributed to women and men across every culture in every state of time. A lot of people say there's nothing. Okay? So we have to be very careful on that. So when I'm talking about goddess and God, I am not necessarily talking about what you may understand as goddess and God. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. So that's very important. And we easily do this. We have to make sense of the unknowable presence, and that's the divine. We can't fully know it as humans. So we very easily project onto that. Okay. And just an example of this, because it's so natural to us. It is really natural for us to think of male and female. And it's so natural that the transgender awareness movement, people, however you want to put that, recently, the last 10 years, has caused a lot of shockwaves, and people are, and particularly tax forms, doctors' forms, are still waiting to catch up on this understanding that there is not necessarily a complete distinction between male and female. It seems natural to us in our society. Okay, first thing someone will say when someone's pregnant, is it a boy or a girl? We divide, boy or girl. But it's not essential across the world. And just one of the examples of this, going beyond the binary, the boogie from Indonesia. Okay, they have 5 genders. 5 genders. They don't have 2 genders. They have 5. Now it's very important when I describe this to stop ourselves thinking in 2 and saying, oh, this is male and a bit extra. This is female and a bit extra. They have 5. We have to try and understand that there's more than just the binary way of looking at things. Okay, so there are 5 genders. The Makunre are what we might identify as cisgender women, meaning women who are born and identified as women or as girls. Okay, that's how we may understand that gender out of 5 genders, not 2. The Orani we may understand as cisgender men, boys born, grow up to be men. Okay. But again, we have not describing these 2 in the boogie, their understanding of the world. We have not exhausted everything. We've only named 2 out of 5. In our minds, we've exhausted everything, but it's 2 out of 5. I think we've got other people coming. Thank you, Morgan. Sorry. I will speak to the future YouTube people watching, but just getting more people into the venue. So, we've not exhausted this. In our mind, we have. Okay. We have the
You've still got plenty
colour
of
line,
room on that.
who, in our way of thinking things, would be women, cisgender women, women with the physical character of women who act like or take on the role of men. Okay? And then we have the Calabi, who are men who act like and take on the role of women. But they're not men in our concept taking on the role of women. That's a Western binary concept. They are the whole specific different gender. And I hope I have to keep reinforcing that because it's alien to the way we think. And then we have the Bisu, and that's one of the Bisu there, who are beyond gender. They're not androgynous, they are seen to be beyond gender, and they're the shamans. They're the ones who work in that direct interaction with the divine and the other world, the Bisu. Okay. So the reason why I'm going through this is just to explain that we have to be careful when we talk about gender and goddess and the Golden Dawn. We're not just going, it's a big mother in the sky. Okay? It's way, way beyond that. Okay, and just for fun, a few years ago, I put this onto the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life is a primary symbol within the Golden Dawn. For people who don't know much about the Golden Dawn, it's a primary symbol that you can map upon the Tree of Life. Everything and every no thing that it exists and does not exist, you can map on the Tree of Life. And we've mapped this here on the male pillar, the female pillar, the taking on the other role, and the middle pillar, the transcendent beyond all genders. Okay. So this culture there gives us, and there's many of these cultures, gives us a little snapshot into thinking beyond the binary, okay, which is very, very important, as any spiritual practitioner will tell you, because the ultimate aim of spirituality is a form of union. Now, while I'm here as peregrine and the divine is outside, there's a separation, there's a binary, and therefore there's a longing, therefore there's a dissonance. And it's when you have that unity beyond the binary that we get somewhere. So if we are locked into binary thinking in our spiritual concepts, something, if you're doing it right, something will come along at some point and some year will slap you down and make you change that. If you're in an organisation or a church or a circle or a coven or a lodge that doesn't allow this, it won't. You will still be locked within it. But you have to go beyond. Hello.
Hello. You forgot the sign saying beware of the map.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we're talking about goddesses. Okay, this is one of the ancient goddesses. Now, what we understand as female deities have been around for a long, long time. They're some of the oldest expressions of human endeavour. Not just, let's say, human spirituality, human religion, but human endeavour. Some humans picking up something and creating a form. So female deities have been around a long time. However, how the people who made these forms understood them, worked with them or not, we have very little understanding of. We can project our understanding, and if we're in a goddess-focused tradition like Wicca, we can say, well, that's a goddess. But our concept of goddess may not have been their concept of what this form meant. And I read an article a few years back about all these goddess figurines, and this academic was saying, well, actually, they're dolls. They weren't goddesses. They were dolls like Barbie. They were dolls. Okay? So we are just trying to understand something. We don't really know what occurred and how they engaged with these forms, with these deity forms. Okay. And that's another important thing, because as soon as we start thinking we know, we are, of course, locking ourselves and limiting ourselves. Okay, so what we can say, however, is when I say goddess, what I'm meaning is that what occurs is that when we engage with those forms link to the divine, link to something that is unlimited, unknowable, and it will change us in a certain way. Okay? And that's what I'm understanding about goddess. Because what we understand now as a good set of divine characteristics for a goddess and for women would include, for example, being self-expressive, having free will, having energy, Now this would not be from other cultures that's worked with goddesses, where women were less active, less self-expression, and it was seen, self-expression wasn't seen as something to be valorized and understood as being good. So we have to be careful, as I keep saying, about projecting onto things, but when we work with these images, we connect with the divine. And one of the key principles of the Golden Dawn, one of the key tricks, it's wonderful, it uses our limited understanding of the world to go beyond that limited understanding. So the Golden Dawn will have, for people who don't know much about it, it will have grades. So it will have grades, Neophyte, and fancy words, Zelators, and you get different badges, and it's almost like the Boy Scouts, who are based on Masonic understanding, which Golden Dawn is based on Masonic understanding, which we'll see in a moment. So you have these grades, for example, and you get titles. You start off without a title, then you're called honoured. So Terry would be nothing, and then after 4 grades we'll say honoured Terry, and you'll be, oh, I'm honoured. And then after another grade and maybe we'll say very honoured. And then after so many years, 20 years, we might say greatly honoured. And later groups went to and even added truly honoured. So these natural ways of climbing the ladder, trying to understand things with our mind, the Golden Dawn says, yeah, go ahead, engage in that, but we're going to use all that energy, and it uses it. It uses all this energy, you can engage with this, and then it just at some point will flip it around if you're going into your spiritual unfoldment and you go, oh, it's worth nothing. And if anyone who's read the Golden Dawn or experienced the Adeptus Mind initiation, that's right there. That you suddenly realize it's worth nothing at all. But it uses our natural tendency to try to understand the mind, the world and divinity by our mind, to try to have these what traditionally are assigned male characteristics of intellect, climbing the ladder, hierarchy, badges, grades. It uses all of those things to actually move us on. It doesn't say, forget about them. It says, yeah, come along, engage with it, and you will still be transformed. And that's the same with the goddess. As long as we're careful, when we say, oh, yes, there's a goddess in the Golden Dawn, what does that mean? It means that when you engage with these images, when you engage with her at the center of the Golden Dawn, she is a link to something completely unknowable, and that is what changes you. Okay, so the tendency to, as I said, do this binary can still be used by yourself, by the Golden Dawn. It will use you to transform yourself if you're open to it. So that's what I mean by goddess, engagement with the goddess. It isn't worshipping in the sense of this is a fixed deity with these characteristics. It is a living, constant theosis experience leading to ultimate union and transformation of ourselves. So that's the goddess in the Golden Dawn. Are you changing something there?
Just need to press
So
record
clog the
again.
file?
All right. I'm just going to change batteries.
Okay. I will pause.
Battery already flat.
Good time.
Batteries already flat.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is shown most particularly in the fact, where did the Golden Dawn come from? Its milieu, its organizational capacity came from the Masons. I presume most people know something about the Masons. They feature every so often in British drama and top shows. 100 years ago, probably 1 in 5 men would have been in the Masons in Australia. So, very large organization, and the founders of the Golden Dawn were all Masons. Masonry, for people who don't know, is a totally male-orientated. It's not a religion, it's a fraternal organization with secrets, enabling one to become a better man. That's how they would say it. But it's definitely all about men. It doesn't let women in at all. Okay, so that's the context it came from. So in there, it's not just that it wasn't about really let women in, but the understanding of divinity within the Masonic milieu was totally male. Totally male. The great architect of the universe was never conceived of as a woman architect, because when it started there probably wasn't any women architects back in 1717. And Masonry is celebrating its 300 year anniversary this year. 1717, United Grand Lodge of England. And the deity, the mystery in ordinary craft or Blue Lodge Masonry, the first 3 degrees, is only once really referred to as a feminine force, and that's talking about nature. They talk about nature in a feminine understanding. Nature, she gives us the gift of death, essentially. That's in one of the ceremonies. She gives us the limiting of our lives. That's the gift, and that's seen as feminine. So this is where the Golden Dawn came from. So that's an interesting thing. It came from 3 Masons. They were involved in non-traditional Masonry beyond the 3 degrees, including the Royal Holy Arch, which we'll look at in a moment. And there they do have a bit more recognition of the feminine deity when they refer to Hukma, holy wisdom, as feminine in the Bible. Definitely seen as feminine there. But largely the deities, or the deity form, is always seen as male in Masonry. So that's where Masonry came from, and Golden Dawn come from. So this is the culture it came from. There's Wynne Westcott in the Society of Rosicrucian in Anglia, which was one of another organisations that fed into Golden Dawn. He's there as the chief in his wonderful get-up. We have 3 Masons of the Holy Royal Arch there. And in case I haven't made it really clear, we are, yes indeed, talking about men with funny hats. Yet somehow, from the men with funny hats comes the Golden Dawn. Okay. That's another history lecture in itself. But it's, yeah. So we have to kind of understand where it came from. So the deity itself, if not seen in Masonry and allied forms of pseudo-Masonic understanding as feminine, there's always been a strand seeing it as feminine. I mean, we can go back to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Okay, so Blessed Virgin Mary in Christianity. We've also got the understanding of the Shekinah in Judaism, and particularly that was used in Kabbalah, where the Shekinah is seen as the feminine force of God settling upon the earth. In the ancient Syriac text in the 2nd century AD, as Christianity was expanding and developing, the Holy Spirit is clearly understood as mother and clearly understood as feminine in ancient Syrian or Syriac text of Christianity. Okay, so the understanding now, I heard a priest recently refer to the Holy Spirit as she. This is not a recent innovation. People are starting to do this now to do a bit of gender balance, but it's way, way, way back. Way, way, way back. Okay. Okay, so we've got this understanding. Oh, I forgot this one. Sorry. Come on, work. And then this gets taken into the Middle Ages. This is one example. This is the Beguines in the Netherlands in 13th to 16th century. This is Mechchild of Magdeburg. Wrote a number of poems. The Flowing Light of Divinity was her main work, and that whole culture, that whole set of communities, the Beguines, saw God as feminine. Okay, they had a feminine understanding of God. Hildegard von Bingen, again, seeing God as feminine. We have Master Eckhart around the same time, talking about God as a mother giving birth to the universe. So these things have always been there somewhere. Always, always been there. So it's just hard to see at this stage because there's not enough research about where did these men of funny hats get this and taken into the Golden Dawn. So it's been there. So it wasn't transmitted, as I said, via the ordinary craft masonry, which is what they were all involved in, the first 3 degrees of masonry. I'm focusing particularly on England now because I haven't done research elsewhere. It was transmitted, however, across the centuries in really some of the larger noble families. And this is the home, Ragley Hall in Warwickshire, of Lady Anne Conway. Now, Lady Anne Conway was an incredible woman. Okay, she set up in the early 1600s a circle inner home of alchemists, Rosicrucians, and Hermeticists. She was the leading light of these people. This is Zelator home which you can visit, which I have visited, and there are older diagrams there of how the gardens were originally laid out. You can see some of it there, and they were laid out upon goddess pagan themes, with Rosicrucian motifs all the way through the chapels. There's another chapel called Arbury Hall, the chapel at Arbury Hall, not far from Ragley Hall in Warwickshire, which is full of Rosicrucian things. And it was clear, and from the little we know, is that you had these odd families, not odd and funny, but the occasional family, stately family, holding on to the mysteries somehow, holding on to the mysteries, and presenting them even in gardens, even in their stately gardens. So that's pretty awesome. And if you can go to Ragley Hall, I suggest you can. So Lady Anne, classic example, she wasn't, I mean, obviously you weren't allowed to, women then couldn't go to universities. So she studied via correspondence, essentially. She studied with the likes of Henry Moore, who acknowledged that by him, he acknowledged that she surpassed any of his students and any of his tutors. And this is all by correspondence, never once at university, because she wasn't allowed. She's noted, she wrote a number of books, and she noted for a wonderful phrase, her gynocentric philosophy. Gynocentric, meaning revolving around women. So these are the sort of places that this sort of stuff held on to this understanding of the feminine understanding of God. We don't know exactly how this translates into the Golden Dawn yet. There's research to be done there. But my intuition is it translates from these sort of things, not from the craft masonry. Okay. Okay. So, we're going to look at now the three women at the very start of the Golden Dawn, before it was actually made. The three, almost the holy feminine trinity out of which was born the Golden Dawn. And most people, if you pick up most Golden Dawn books, you won't know, there'll be very little mentioned about these women, but they are it. They are essential. Brilliant women. Firstly, we have Blavatsky. Helena Petrona Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society in 1875, died in 1891, 3 years after the Golden Dawn had birthed. The founders of the Golden Dawn, two of them, Mathers and Westcott, lectured at the T.S. Lodge in London, were closely associated with the leaders there, and there was a lot of cross-fertilization. If it wasn't for Helena Petrona Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, as she often called, the Golden Dawn would have had much harder time getting anywhere, because it was her work and her audacity to write a book called Isis Unveiled, which was a major work, and it's interesting that it's called Isis Unveiled, and start talking about things like astral planes, magic, transformation, elementals, invocations, past lives. And she broke open, at the end of the 19th century in Victorian England and across the world, broke open the strictures of intellectual conceit and arrogance, really, that was happening at the time. She is immensely influential on the Golden Dawn founders, and through them on the Golden Dawn itself. So HPB. Now we have a lady who most people may not have heard of, Mary Atwood. Who has heard of Mary Atwood?
A writer, was it?
Hmm?
She was a writer.
She was a writer.
Vaguely heard of her, but I don't
Yes,
know.
we've got 3 out of 20 here, so that's about right, you know. Mary Atwood, and again, we don't know exactly where her and her father, because her father studied alchemy and the Hermetic sciences with her, we don't know exactly where they got their material from. It may have been just from books, and a lot of good application to the few books that were there. Chances are there's some secret tradition out there we don't know about. Okay, but she wrote a book called A Suggestive Inquiry into the Hermetic Mystery, 1850, which her father financed he wrote a long prose poem around the same time dealing with the same topic. And he said, yeah, I'll finance it. It was published. Then he read her book and went, what have you done? Because she revealed all the secrets. And he arranged for all the books to be collected back up and essentially destroyed. A few remained. Okay? A few remained. It was reissued in 1918 by a Mason, W. Wilmhurst, big Masonic writer from London. A few of those books remained. One of them was in the private library of the Society of Rosicrucian in Anglia, thanks to Westcott, who was one of the founders of the Golden Dawn. So one of the founders of the Golden Dawn was very intimate with this book that was destroyed because it revealed all the secrets of Hermetic science. So that's really, really interesting. Okay, I'm just going to quote Tony Fuller again. Oh no, sorry, Arthur Waite. He says that all modern mystical literature is referable ultimately either to the writings of Eliphas Levi or Mrs. Atwood. And then later, he changed his mind a bit. It's doubtful if Levi did not himself owe something to Atwood, which he did. Fuller says, virtually every major and minor theme of late 19th century Western occultism is treated at length in Mrs. Atwood's book. Okay. Much of the symbolism of the GD is found in a suggestive inquiry into the Hermetic mystery. And as I said, it was reissued in 1918, Golden Dawn was formed in 1888. It was these little remaining copies that ended up in the Golden Dawn private libraries that we can thank for that direct influence. And that's Mary Atwood. Now there's an interesting bit, which I found when I was studying this, a suggestive inquiry. Does people know the pop singer Pink? Who's Pink? Yep, I didn't know until I started studying this. In a video called You and Your Hand, okay, which is referring to using Victorian language, self-love, using the life forces. Understanding what I mean? Self-love using the life forces. That's what it's referring to. It's talking about a guy who wants to date her, and she said, well, just be with you and your hand. In that video, we find Pink there reading a suggestive inquiry into the Hermetic mystery. Now, one of the aspects of the Hermetic mysteries, and could have been why her father freaked out, was that the self-love, the sexual forces, are utilized in some alchemical procedures. And it's in there, in that video. And that's just where I went, who produced this video? How did this end up being beamed around the world? This obscure book in a modern pop video, in an oblique reference. Very interesting, very interesting. That's Mrs. Atwood. I mean, you know, a exceptionally important and overlooked until recently influence upon the Golden Dawn and the whole of Western Esoterica from 1850 onwards. And then we have the third woman who is probably the most important in some ways, Anna Bona Kingsford. Okay. Anna Kingsford died just before the Golden Dawn was formed. Okay. She was initially involved in the Theosophical Lodge in London in the 1870s and 1880s. And then she formed the Hermetic Society because she wanted to have a more Western approach to the mysteries and to the divine exploration than the Theosophical Society was offering. And she wanted to go through the Hermetic and the Western approach. So she formed what is called the Hermetic Society. It's the founders of the Golden Dawn, Westcott and Mathers, I don't think Woodman, Westcott and Mathers, lectured there and were members of that society. There is even tentative evidence, no direct evidence, that in 1885, 3 years before the Golden Dawn, a prototype Golden Dawn was actually operating in London with her, Westcott and Mathers, and a few other people. There's some evidence to suggest that. So she had this amazing group called the Hermetic Society. She wrote a book called The Perfect Way. Okay. What's interesting about The Perfect Way is that the symbol of the Golden Dawn, which is over there, the cross and the triangle, is described and is in the Perfect Way. A number of the other symbols, all the themes that are taken from the Golden Dawn, some of the diagrams that find their way into the initiation ceremonies are in the Perfect Way. So there's a tremendous amount of influence. Westcott described Anna Kingsford as illumined by the sun. Illumined by the sun. She was obviously an incredibly important woman. She died very young of TB, unfortunately. And it's quite likely that if she didn't die, if the Hermetic Society continued, it's quite likely the Golden Dawn may never have been born. It started to be developed as she got sick and was no longer lecturing, and then she ends up dying, and then shortly after the Golden Dawn was actually born. So her influence cannot be overstated. And I don't know if people know that the mythic history of the Golden Dawn, which was that it was founded by Westcott finding or obtaining these, what's now called the cipher manuscripts, because certain material points in the manuscripts were in cipher manuscripts, translated. And they had an address of a woman adept, significant that it's a woman adept, in Germany, and the motto of that woman adept, Sapiens Dominita Astris, by the stars you shall rule, was the same motto as what Anna Kingsford had. So that's a beautiful little reference that Westcott put into those manuscripts. So it's a significant source of much of the Golden Dawn is Anna Kingsford. Are people getting cold? No? Good. Just checking. Yeah. So one of the examples with this card, she has described in the Perfect Way, which I couldn't lift the picture from, what becomes the universe card of the Golden Dawn. This is actually much earlier, but even she is referring on, this is from 1650 in a book called The Divine Commander. And that's, again, a feminine force there depicted, becomes another feminine force in the Golden Dawn. And all of that sort of stuff is through Anna Kingsford's work. But as I say, she's drawing on older stuff as well. So there's these points, there's these little hints of an ongoing tradition we don't fully understand. Okay. So that's the leading up to the Golden Dawn. I'm just going to now look at the Golden Dawn specifically. I'm going to look at the different levels, shall we put, because as I said, it does use levels, it does use our hierarchical mind. We're going to look at the different levels of the Golden Dawn and where and how the goddess is central to the Golden Dawn and helps us with our transformation and movement towards theosis. Okay, so the overall. Okay, again, paraphrasing Tony Fuller and a couple of other commentators, including myself, the feminine is seen as the most powerful spiritual force in the Golden Dawn. It is seen as that. Okay, it is quite well articulated in the later grades, very clearly, as the most powerful spiritual force, this feminine goddess. They have this concept in the Golden Dawn of that return to Eden, which is a symbol of theosis, of coming back to our perfection in union with the divine. And that return to Eden is only possible via the feminine. And again, that's articulated, that's very, very clearly articulated throughout the Golden Dawn. It's only possible via the feminine. The founders, so Westcott and Mathers, don't know much about Woodman, but definitely Westcott and Mathers, were definitely very much in support of the equality of the sexes. The Golden Dawn was the first magical order to admit women and men. Okay? There was a little group called the Sat Baha'i. Just beforehand, it wasn't magical. It did admit women and men. It didn't last very long, and it's doubtful it had any actual meetings of the Sat Baha'i. Other than that, Golden Dawn. And it was a particular thing of Westcott that he wanted women to work with. And this comes, and it's very clear in some of his letters, because of the influence of Anna Kingsford. He has such a great experience, whatever their experiences were, in the Hermetic Society. He wanted to continue it with women in the Golden Dawn. Mathers was ardent supporter of the rights of women. This, remember, 1888 is 30 years before some women got the vote in England in 1918. It was another 10 years before all women got the vote. And this is happening 30 years before even that initial change of women getting the vote. Okay. Mathers does some accurate translations. He talks about in his Kabbalah Unveiled how the translators of the Bible and other spiritual texts often translate feminine words into masculine. And he's very clear on that. So he translates Ruach, Eloha, and its translation should be Ruach Eloha Hadath. It should be translated, one is she, the force of life, not just one is he. And often before that, it was often translated very narrowly. Okay? So Mathers looked at this and went, no, this isn't right, it's time to translate correctly. Now in these mythical cipher manuscripts we talked about, which were probably written by Westcott himself, there's a whole story on that, which we can explore. So these mythical cipher manuscripts, the candidate is often referred to as she. Now that's a very strange thing for 1888, where women and men were often included and lumped under the male pronoun of he. But the candidate is referred to as she. And again, I think that's an indication of where the centrality of needing to have women involved was in the forefront of Westcott's mind. Okay, the first GD temple was dedicated to Isis, Isis Urania, the Isis of wisdom. It is an unofficial tradition that a new GD order anywhere around the world will have their initial mother temple dedicated to a goddess. Which makes sense. If you've got a mother temple, it needs to have a goddess behind it, I would say. So that's very common practice. Now, Mathers with his wife Bowena, who is the often hidden aspect. I mean, they worked together beautifully, him and his wife. They did a series of public, semi-public rites to Isis, to bring Isis back into Paris. And Paris was, back in Roman times, a central point of the Isean worship. The Isean worship in Roman Empire didn't just stay in Rome, it went all around, including London. But there was a big centre in Paris. Mathers used Golden Dawn techniques with his wife Marina, who took on the role of high priestess, and they invoked and did ceremonial theatre to invoke and bring Isis back into Paris. Again, showing the importance, the absolute importance of the feminine for the Mathers. A little bit later, Dion Fortune, who was a Golden Dawn initiate, developed the rites of Isis, parts of which are in her novels, Moon Magic and Sea Princess. The full version was released 4 years ago now by Gareth Knight, in a book called The Rites of Isis, Hand of Pen, where the full version's there. That was only, so it's taken a long time for the full versions to be released, and that again was semi-public. So we're seeing here not only a worshipping, a dedicating, a working with goddess and the feminine force, but the understanding that it needs to go beyond the small group. It needs to find some way into the greater society, which of course is what you would expect from what we traditionally understand as a mother, as a goddess, loving the entire world. Isis Mundi, Isis of the world. So Dion Fortune's work is impeccable. And as I said, the full version only came out recently. There is, one day I would love to see it performed fully in Perth. And that may happen. That may happen in the next couple of years. So, overall GD and RRAC, which is the inner order context. Let's go into some specifics. The first grade and the first ceremony that a candidate in the Golden Dawn enters into is called the Neophyte ceremony. Beginner, neophyte, new person. Okay. The first thing you want to notice is that all initiation ceremonies are rebirths. Now, if you've got a rebirth, it's involving some form of birth. What force, if we're going to be gender however gender we look at the world, gives birth is the feminine, is the mother. It's the hidden thing that's right underneath that so many people just don't, they might, oh yes, it's a form of rebirth. This initiation is a form of rebirth. That initiation is a form of rebirth. And what can give birth? A mother. Just that simple. So right at the very core of every aspect of the Golden Dawn is the goddess, because we are born again through her. And again, this is why in the ancient Syriac text and in modern revisionist Christianity, the spirit is seen as a mother, because we are born not from the Holy Spirit as a generic concept, but as a mother. We are only born from the mother. In the Golden Dawn Neophyte ceremony, the candidate is paraded around 3 times in the dark with a blindfold. And those 3 relate to the 3 trimesters of pregnancy. First, second, third trimester, and then it comes out, and then the light comes off, and you're born out of the darkness of the womb. The blindfold comes off, the lights come into your eyes. It relates completely to that gestation and then birth via the mother. So the temple space is essentially a womb. Okay, there's a diagram there. Ancient Egyptian, which is the basis of the Neophyte ceremony of the Golden Dawn. There's Osiris, a male force, ruling the temple, just as Osiris in Egyptian mythology rules the underworld. But he only rules via the power of 2 goddesses behind him, Isis and Nephthys, her sister. And that's clear in the Golden Dawn. The Hierophant represents Osiris. The Hierophant, she or he, is at the east. But they are only ruling because on either side are officers representing and holding the power of Isis and Nephthys. So, right in the Golden Dawn Neophyte ceremony, and from then onwards, it's really clear that this power of transformation that the Hierophant gives is only possible because behind the Hierophant are the 2 goddesses. Absolutely clear. The hegemon, who is another key officer, is a person who does certain things in the ritual. The hegemon represents and attracts the higher aspirations of the soul. So this is the soul that's moving towards unity with the unknowable, towards theosis. The hegemon is the representation of that. And the form that she takes on is the goddess Mart, essentially. Another Egyptian goddess, Mart. So the one that leads the candidate from darkness to light is a goddess. The one that stays with you through the darkness is a goddess. The one that calls you out of the darkness to the light, goddess. Goddess, goddess, goddess. All the way through. So the hegemon, very key, very, very key character, officer in the Golden Dawn. In the final consecration, that's when the candidate has had themselves born, come out of the light. They get consecrated with water and fire. It says very clearly in the documents that talk about that. It says it is as if the wings of Isis and Nephthys enfold and bring the candidate to life. They're brought to life by the goddess. Absolutely clear there. Okay, the Hebrew letter He kind of is represented by our hedge. Each of the officers along the central column in the Neophyte, the main officers, the one who make it work, they all their names all connected with the letter H: Hierophant, Hegemon, and Hiereus. And there's a big play made of that. There's a big understanding made of that, and it's all about life. H represents life in ancient Greek, but it also represents in ancient Hebrew the great mother of heaven, He, and that's shown in later grades. So it's He, the mother of heaven. It's there in the 3 main officers of the Neophyte ceremony. So you've got all this hidden but powerful, and it's what actually makes it work. It's what actually makes the Neophyte work. This hidden goddess current and presence in the Neophyte ceremony, impacting upon and drawing the candidate from the darkness of the womb to the light of birth via the Great Mother. Absolutely clear once you start looking at it. Okay, we'll continue on. There's a lot, but it's not that. Windows is not. Oh, don't worry about that. I know what you're laughing at. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. So the rest. So you have a Neophyte ceremony. Then there's four what's called the outer order grades, where you progress, you climb, you get different titles, and at one point you get called honoured towards the end. This is the outer order. Okay. If you have a look at the powers, the gender of the gods behind them, the symbols in these grades, you will find they are either gender balanced or weighted towards the goddess. Okay. There's no grade in there where the forces are more what we would call masculine. Once you have a look at it, it is more feminine, most often, or occasionally gender balanced. The next grade after the climbing of the ladder after Neophyte, the Zelator grade, the Hierophant at that point, okay, is the main officer. The Hierophant is always the main officer. And the Hierophant very clearly represents what they call the left-hand feminine cherubic angel of the ark. Okay, feminine, Sandalphon. That who is the main officer represents. So what's making this ceremony work again is a feminine force. The Hierophant has that feminine force. There, in the Golden Dawn, following Masonic and pseudo-Masonic tradition, one of the ways of transmitting the mysteries is often through diagrams. So a candidate is taken to look at a diagram. Now, the diagrams are symbols, they're not signs. So what I'm saying by that is that they don't have a fixed connotative meaning. This means this, this means this, this means this. They are a symbol like a sunset that can mean a million things to a million different people. Okay. But you have these diagrams full of these symbols that are rich and alive. And the candidate in the Zelator is taken to three main diagrams. There's one called the showbread, one called the seven-branch candlestick, and then you have one relating to the three mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So all three diagrams are feminine mysteries. The last one I've said, they're called mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet. They are the letters that birth the rest of the alphabet. And since the Hebrew alphabet is seen to be representative and seen to be the cause of creation, they are the three principles of everything that is around us and everything we experience. They're mothers. The seven-branch candlestick refers to the sevenfold principle of the goddess in the Pleiades and in other mythic symbols. You've got the 12, and those are what's called the showbread. The center of it is the letter He, the great mother of heaven. That's the center of it. Okay. So all the three diagrams they are exposed to are feminine forces in the Zelator. That's the next grade up. If you haven't had enough in the Neophyte, you get more goddesses in the Zelator. And it just keeps coming. And these are just some examples. We're not going through the whole ceremonies, of course. Otherwise it would be weeks. So in the Theoricus, wonderful name, that's the next one, there is the universe tarot trump, which we saw previously. And that tarot trump of the universe has upon it a feminine force who is equated with the Shekinah, the the settling divinity, feminine divinity in the Hebraic mysteries. She's also equated with Isis, veiled. She's also equated with the Sandalphon, the left-hand feminine angel. And she's equated with Mother Nature. There's this richness of symbolic merging in the Golden Dawn. And what's behind it is the ultimate mystery of Goddess. That's why they do it. They say, she is this, she is this, she is this. So you get to the ultimate mystery behind it, which is a feminine mystery. That's why you have a feminine card you're exposed to in the Theoricus. In the Practicus, there's an Eden diagram where it is Eve who's supporting the whole universe. It is she that is placed when the candidate gets exposed to this diagram. She who is placed within the candidate sphere, within their aura in one sense. So they have this feminine force that helps them to uphold their entire edifice from then on of spiritual unfoldment. It's very clearly another feminine mystery there. Okay. What Tony Fuller says about this is that each grade is reached, each grade reaches a process essentially of the feminine power. So it's one feminine power after another after another. You cannot attain to these grades. You cannot understand them fully unless you're embracing the feminine power. Okay? And this is not a feminine power, as we said before, that is in our concept. Okay? The way the Golden Dawn works, it will break down your concepts. So your understanding of feminine power will change as you go through the grades, as your understanding of divinity, as your understanding of life, and most importantly, your understanding of yourself in relation to all of these things will change. Nothing will stay the same. And that's the main thrust of the Golden Dawn. Nothing stays the same. Okay. We're now into the inner order. There's not too much longer, there's only the inner order. So, okay. So the inner order, clearly in the inner order, it's very much constituted by an understanding of the tree of life. Okay, as I said, it's the main symbol of the Golden Dawn. The top sphere up there can represent divinity, God, unity. The bottom sphere represents materiality, our physical universe. Again, it's hierarchical. Golden Dawn uses hierarchy. It's in our mind. It's in society that we have hierarchy. It uses it to go beyond hierarchy. Okay? And what it says is all the knowledge and blessings come from the middle pillar. From that middle pillar. So from the white down to the yellow, down to the purple, into our physical universe. Come straight. That's consciousness. That's called the pillar of consciousness. So the blessings, the spiritual forces we have come down that middle pillar into ourselves. Now when we look at these in relation to the tarot, because each of these paths here are related to one of the 22 tarot trumps. And when we look at that, and I'm using Pixie Coleman Smith's tarot trumps here, because she does such good work. These paths relate to the High Priestess, feminine form, the feminine angel of temperance, and that 32nd path, that path we're just talking about, the universe, the world, Sandown Font, Shekinah. So that way of connecting with the unity, those paths are all, they're like three goddesses, 1, 2, 3. And that's how we get it. That's how we get the knowledge. The gnosis, if you want to use the term gnosis. Gnosis comes from something that's beyond ourselves, and it comes via a feminine form, and that's why many of the Gnostic traditions focus so much upon the feminine goddess, shall we call it, Sophia, wisdom, that illuminates us from our material condition. Similar principle here. Goddess, goddess, goddess. That's the essence of getting that spiritual illumination in the inner order. Okay, moving on. Moving on. I think I've got the way there we go. More specifics in the order. So, the inner order is Rosicrucian. Okay, we're not giving anything away, it's all published. What that means, talking about secrecy before, what it means, say something Rosicrucian, oh yeah, that's a knowing of. To know what Rosicrucian means, you have to be in there. So the actual secret is never given away. Now, the Rosicrucians were a group of Christian mystics in the early 17th century, based upon a number of what we call manifestos, publications, from 1604 onwards. And the Rosicrucians, as they developed, worked extensively with these three goddesses, Venus, Sophia, and Isis. And again, they were interchanged. one seen as the other. So the Rosicrucian current, the Rosicrucian blessings being at the center of the inner order of the Golden Dawn, places the goddess at the center and in the order of the Golden Dawn, because it's Rosicrucian. And that's what makes Rosicrucian work. And we see here the idea in Rosicrucian. This is from the Golden Rosy Cross in the 1750s, 1780s in Germany. This is an image here of Lady Venus taking the candidate across a path full of snakes and other things you want to avoid into the spirit of illumination in that chamber there. So it is Venus who takes the candidate towards illumination. And in the Golden Rosenkreuz, it was clear that the candidate in some way belonged to Venus. They didn't belong to themselves, they belonged to Venus. They belonged to that spirit that would take you to illumination via the feminine force. So again, this is all what's in the center of the Golden Dawn. We now then come to the physical center of the inner order of the Golden Dawn, which is the vault. Now, in the Rosicrucian myth, Christian Rosenkreuz, who founded the Rosicrucians, attracted a number of people, all men, around him, and then he died, and then he was buried somewhere in what they call the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Collegiate Spirit, the College of the Spirit, in a building there, and they sort of lost where he was buried. And after 120 years, when they were doing some renovations, they accidentally found the door that led to his burial vault. Okay, and this was described as a 7-vaulted chamber where the light shone without a visible source. And in the middle of it was the body of Christian Rosenkreuz, who hadn't perished. He was still physically there. He hadn't corrupted at all. And the Golden Dawn, Rosicrucian inner order, created their own vault. This is a computer-generated graphic of it. So, and if anyone's been in a vault or two, it's an intense experience. It's a 7-sided vault, 5 foot by 8 foot, so it's quite small, and it has these beautiful, intense symbols all the way through it. And the 7 relates to Venus, the goddess of nature. The vault is symbolically situated at the center of the earth, nature, where its blessings are taken, it gets its blessings from the spiritual currents that enter the earth and are transmitted to the vault through the symbolism of the 7 sides of Venus. As you enter the vault, as you see on the left-hand side, each side is attributed to one of the 7 planets. The doorway to the vault is attributed to Lady Venus. The only way you can go into this vault is through Venus, through the Lady Venus. And that's an experience of Mother Nature's experience of reality. And it's at this point in this ceremony where all the titles we said before, Terry being honoured, we realise it means nothing in this ceremony. So you enter in one sense symbolically naked, you enter without anything. And this is the same, you are returning to your womb. This is a womb as well as a tomb. Because you go in there, you die to your old self, and you're reborn by the power of the goddess Venus. However you see that representation, by the power of the goddess, you are reborn out as a different person. So at the center even of the inner order, there is the goddess, into her womb and out of the womb. And if you've been in a vault, you will know it feels extremely womb-like. And it's supposed to. It is supposed to feel that way. Continuing on with the inner order, people may recognize that is a lotus wand. It is the main tool of the inner order member. Inner order members all make this themselves. It is described as a simple wand of Isis. It is an Isean wand. This is their main tool. So this is designed. You're holding the power of Isis, Isis of nature. Each of these 12 bands here represent the 12 signs of the zodiac, set between the earth, the black, and the unknown spirit at the top, the white. It's an Isis of nature. So you have got an Isean tool as the one you make yourself, and it's the main tool. Now, I mean, if you compare this, and just a little dig, if you compare this to Wicca, which is an overtly goddess tradition, no question there, and the main tool is an Athame. The main tool here is a wand of Isis. So I find that cute, you know. So the Golden Dawn is all very much about what's hidden, what's not obviously there, except you're making a wand of Isis for yourself if you're in the inner order. Okay, almost finished. In the later grades of one form of the Golden Dawn, because there was a split, different people in different ways in 1903, and in the Stella Matutina, the Star of the Morning arm of the Golden Dawn, the later grades of the inner order have a key figure called the Matrona, who is essentially a goddess figure. And her presence is, if you read this stuff or meditate on it, it's incredible. She comes as the Shekinah, and that's clear. And she's the one who works those later grades. She's the one who makes them happen. And again, it's overt. There's nothing subtle about that. So even as we progress further on in climbing the hierarchy, the goddess is still central. And in these inner order, these ones, each officer represents the Egyptian goddesses and gods. And we will notice, if you look at that, it's only the goddesses that carry both the wand and the ankh. Okay? Some of the gods may carry a wand, some may carry an ankh. But the goddesses carry both, because they're the ones who give life. The ankh is the symbol of life. So that's another little key thing there. That's, again, not obvious. Okay. So that's that. Well, I'll just finish up with the idea of moving forward a bit. Going forward, here in 2017, because there's no point in delivering stuff if nothing's going to change. So, the idea of this lecture and the way some groups are working, certainly any group I'm involved with is working, is to bring the goddess more out in the Golden Dawn. Now, I want to stress, this is not adding. We're not adding anything. We're not going, we're missing the goddess. Let's bring in this Wiccan invitation. We're not doing that. It's all there. We're just bringing it out more. So I could encourage, and speaking to the future of YouTube, people there watching this now, I would encourage bringing out the goddess more, because she's right there. We can change the culture of the Golden Dawn, and by that what I mean is that there's simple things you can do. You can start having the understanding that the sexist language there can be changed. Some of it you don't want to change until you know exactly what you're changing, but some of it which refers to the candidate as he. There's no reason you can't say he one paragraph and then she the next paragraph. There's no reason why you can't do that. Okay. The invocations and stuff, you have to know exactly what's happening before you change. But there's a whole raft of documentation and approaches that can be changed, and that will slowly change the culture of the Golden Dawn. Because a lot of people do think the Golden Dawn is very male and male-orientated. And we had this, they may be here, if you're here, no offense to you, come and speak to me afterwards. Someone, I posted this on Facebook, and they did a response, sorry to disappoint you ladies, but the Golden Dawn is male only, essentially. Traditionally male only.
Trust me, I'm a high priest as well as a GD member. That was the most.
Yes, they said they have studied Wicca and the Golden Dawn, and it was male only. Yeah, and that's an extreme view. I've very rarely have come across that, but I've certainly have come across many people who go that GD, Golden Dawn, is male, it's authoritarian, it's wanky, it's stuck up its own bum, you know, those sort of things, and it's not flowing in life. And it doesn't have to be. It really, really doesn't have to be. It can be as expressive and as juicy as any of the pagan communities out there as well. And it's all in there. Again, we're not adding anything. But the culture needs to change.
The culture. or the perception of the culture.
Yes, the perception of the culture. But there are some groups that are pretty much like that. I didn't include it, but I did have, you remember the slide with the men with the funny hats? I did have one going, and today, with a group of men with funny hats. But I didn't do that because it's going on YouTube, and I didn't know who would respond. But there are groups out there who are essentially the same. Okay, so they need to change. They will not be named. Stop myself. Okay, what have I got? Yeah, as I said, change the text to reflect gender accuracy. So, for example, and I put this in my book, when we say Raphael, which means God is healed, or it's God who does the healing, or healer of God, El means unity. It's both male, female, and way beyond male and female. So all the angel names that end in El. El means unity. It doesn't mean God, as in an old man up there with a beard. It doesn't mean that. So we can start changing that. And again, this is not doing damage to the original meaning. It's getting to the original meaning. It's getting to the original meaning. Now this one's cute. Okay. Oh, hi.
I would like to add something.
Sure, Sue.
With the God forms,
Yes?
in the Neophytes, for want of a better term, the God form behind those of the Deus officers, is that of Hathor?
Ha-Hathor, yes.
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 House of Force. Great mother.
Yes. Absolutely right. The cherub at the east is Ha-Hathor, the goddess of the east. Exactly. Yes. And in other, beyond the Neophyte, there are always goddesses there as well. There are always goddesses, depending on the grade. They're always there at the east. Yes. Good point. Thank you. Now, talking about changing things, just this last week, I found a website that had archival copies of the Occult Review, which was one of the major occult magazines from the early 20th century. And I've been trying to get a copy of an article called Rose of the World by a woman called Rosamund Sabine from 1930. Rosamund Sabine is one of these people who I suspect is the power behind what became Wicca. She was the only one in Joe Garner, the founder of Wicca Circle, who had any practical occult experience. There are some co-masons, but Rosamund Sabine was initiated into the Golden Dawn in one version of it with Arthur Waite in 1905. She wrote an article in 1930. So she's a continuous practitioner, and she was known to Joe Garner. Okay. And in talking about changing the gender and changing language, in this wonderful article, Rose of the World, she breaks her oath, I have to be honest. She reveals stuff that really wasn't then published. But it's beautiful. It's talking about the symbol of the rose and its place in the Golden Dawn. And in it she does what groups and people like myself are doing now. So she's talking about nature, and she's talking about the candidate not being able to comprehend nature. And she changes that to the candidate not being able to go beyond the veil of Isis. She starts changing all these things. And this was happening back in 1930. So whatever group she was involved with then would be really interesting to find out and to study. Okay, so there's a lot of research still being done on this. But I may blog on and do a link on that. Simon's kindly transcribed it, so we can. I might blog that wonderful article by Rosamund, because I think it deserves to be out there more. Yes, so she's one of the key characters waiting to have research done. Rosamund Sabine.
Is that currently being discussed by pagan scholars right now, the possible role of Rosamund saving
She's mentioned in some of Philip Heselton's work.
She is? Okay.
Yes, I've written to Philip Heselton and say,
Yep.
you have to look at Rosamund Sabine.
Yep.
And he said, I'm doing Doreen Valiente
Yep.
right now. He's now finished Doreen Valiente, so he may get onto Rosamund Sabine.
Okay, so he's all over it.
I wouldn't say he's all over it. He could do a lot more on it. But Rosamund Sabine, I'll be with you in a moment soon.
Yeah.
Rosamund Sabine, like she's so interesting, like she was initiated in 1905, right?
Yes.
Rosamund Sabine, she took for her motto, now in Golden Dawn you take a motto that is the highest
The
aspirations
original
of the
Golden
soul.
Dawn was gone then. Which of the splits
Arthur
was
Waite,
she-
the Holy Order of the Golden Dawn,
Yeah.
independent and rectified, right? Initiated, and she took for her motto Vacuna. Now Vacuna is the goddess of the Sabine people in Rome. She's the prime goddess. But this is the interesting bit. She wasn't married then to Major Sabine. She was still had a maiden name of Carsnew. But she took on a Sabine goddess name. So she obviously was engaged or knew something or was arranged or something. But she took on a goddess name. And what's more with Rosamund Sabine, Darcy Kuntz in one of his books transcribed some material, ritual rolls. She signs her name Ms. M.S. in 1905, one of the earliest recorded representations of that. Absolutely stunning. So she's just waiting to be researched. Yeah. Brilliant. Sue.
I was just going to comment on her name, Rosamund,
Yes.
Rose of the World.
Rose of the world, literally. It's just like, you know, it's like she was born to it, isn't it? She was born to it and married to it,
Yes.
you know?
And had to change it to Vacuna.
Yes.
To not the shame.
Yeah, so interesting. Just an interesting woman. Okay, so after that bit of excitement, what else can we do? Yes, and create structures and group open to a world beyond traditional gender. So, for example, an example of that I put on Facebook just last year or so, whereas we have this idea that in the Golden Dawn you can be a frate or soror, a brother or a sister. There are people who, through their own choice, identify as non-gender binary, and there are people who are born who are intersex, who are non-gender binary. So I was saying, well, how come, you know, why don't we include something like a companion as well? So you can be a frate, companion, or soror, for these people who do not identify with male or female. So these are the sort of small things that will make a big cultural difference that we can do going forward. So that's going forward. I'll just finish with this. This is an invocation that could come from any pagan group, but it's actually from the Adeptus Major ceremony of the Stella Matutina. Let us then entreat the Great Mother to raise us all from the death of the soul to life in the spirit. Mother of life, hidden home of fire in the spirit, grant us thy life. Thank you. So we can take questions if anyone's got questions. Peter.
Annie Bazant, she was around that time, the same
Yes.
capacity.
Yes, she was.
But she doesn't seem to get too much of a mention because of her writings were sort of frowned upon, I guess. But she was a very prolific writer.
Yes, Annie Besant was amazing. She was amazing politically as well as spiritually. She did a lot of work for the Home Rule of India. She did a lot of charitable work in India and Ceylon. And her work is overshadowed because she partnered up with Leadbeater. So everyone focuses on Leadbeater,
Yeah.
but she, in her own right, until she got quite old, and then the writings become very scattered. But when she was at her prime, her writings are stunning. I would absolutely agree with you.
I have some of her works.
Yes.
actually. Yes.
Absolutely agree. The influence of Annie Besant in the Golden Dawn isn't clear. It is in the later groups, like the Stella Matutina.
Yeah.
You see some papers that quote her. So she gets influence a bit later on, not in the founding, in the 1912 to 1920 era. Then people are quoting her. So that's where she comes in, particularly the Whare temple in New Zealand. She's a bit of an influence there.
But I thought she would have been, or should have been recognised more for her work because she was brilliant.
She was brilliant. She just didn't influence the founding of the Golden Dawn. But she was brilliant.
In Wicca,
Yes.
the high priestess is considered first among equals.
Yes.
So is that the same in the Golden Dawn?
The
The equivalent, you know,
yes. Essentially, who rules is not gender specific. Okay. In terms of the symbolism, the ruler of the temple is the imperator, who represents the goddess Neptus. but they are seen as first among equals, because they're, with the premonstrata, who recognize, who is, symbolises Isis. So it is seen as first among equals, yes. It's the same, but anyone can take on that role. It could be a man or a woman, or even an intersex person. Yes. Peter again.
Yeah, any male that works within the craft or magic or anything.
Yes.
Always also has the feminine side of their own feminine side of their own side.
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Because you have to have balance. Because if you don't have balance, people just go mad because they do magic or whatever it is, and it just becomes like insanity, you know?
Yes.
You know, because they work one strict male orientated path, and then it just leads to ruin.
yes, I would agree. There's a balance, and some people do use the understanding of male and female as a way of balancing, and we can certainly do that, and that is certainly done in the Golden Dawn as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there is an attempt, particularly like in the tarot, to have everything in balance, completely in balance. Pixie Coleman Smith was the one who took the traditional understanding of the knaves being male and made them into female, got back to the balance. It was Pixie Coleman Smith's work in the outer world, drawing from the Golden Dawn, as Graham here, who's an expert on that, would be able to say, definitely drawing from the Golden Dawn.
Would you agree with taking a caution with, you were talking about making changes
Yep.
to some of the structures. We do live in a patriarchy.
Yes.
And you can't assume that simply rearranging words is going to change the forces behind them.
No, that's true.
Especially if you've got hierarchy involved in your structures.
Mm.
So would you advise a caution there with how these, you know, it's not how these things are done in terms of you can never assume that you have allowed all place for the feminine to flow in a patriarchal structure.
Yes. So what I'm hearing there is that we can't assume our changes will actually make a difference, because we are constantly influenced by our movement in and out of the patriarchy. It's not like we're a closed vessel in a GD order. And so yes, I would agree, you have to have lots of caution there, and there has to be rigorous self-examination from individuals and as a group to actually make these serious changes. Absolutely.
Well, in fact, you said in and out of the patriarchy, but there is no out of the patriarchy. The patriarchy constantly adapts and assimilates every change.
So it's there within our groups. Yes, I would agree with that.
But to every small change, it grows. We are an evolving society. So, you know, it's no good just saying, oh, well, we're a patriarchal society, let's just not do it.
No, I think what Morgan's calling for is a
Yes.
radical transformation,
That's
not
right,
a
but
surface transformation.
If you do it slowly, it actually becomes a radical one eventually. And you have to make a start somewhere.
But you see, someone like Rosamund Sabine, who she obviously was a great, great practitioner, she could access something very radical to the point of calling herself Liz in 1905.
Yes.
And that change has gradually entered the culture. And that's because she was able to connect with that radical force through her practices. So I just think we have to be careful of, you know, simplifying through what you were saying in the beginning, the concepts. Like we come with these concepts, and there's a lot of assumptions behind them. It's constant work, constant practice.
Yes.
In order to make those changes really possible.
Yes, I would agree. It is constant.
And that's the sort of
Yeah.
self-reflection, and that's reflecting as a group on what this all means as well. So the self-analysis of how you perceive that, and also your group and how your group operates as well.
Yes.
Yeah, don't just say it like act it, do it.
And live it
Live it.
as much as you can,
Yeah.
as Morgan was
In
saying.
a patriarchal society,
Live it
yeah.
as much
yeah.
as you can.
Well, she was living in a patriarchal society, but look,
Very much.
look at what her self-reflection and
Yes.
change
Has
did.
brought us-
And as Morgan said, it's got, that sort of stuff has gone out, and that goes back to the
Yeah.
understanding that Dion had and the Mathers of doing something that's semi-public, that's getting stuff out
Mm.
there, you know? Wonderful ideas. Thank you, Morgan. Any other questions, comments, or anything before we finish up?
Just a very, very minor point, because you said that the gods in the god forms of the Neophyte temple had one tool, but what about the Anubis of the West?
Sorry, I did one tool.
Had only one, and they had one tool.
I was talking about the inner order. Yes, I was talking about the god forms, that was up on the stage of the inner
I
order.
thought it was all about.
No, it's the inner. Yes. Yes, no, it isn't, and yes, it's the inner order of, particularly of the Stella Matutina you're talking about there. The god forms of the other advanced orders aren't really out there. You're talking about the Stella Matutina in order. Yep.
I'd like to make the point, there's one thing to push, if you like, the idea of the great feminine behind everything.
Yes.
But I think a lot of the patriarchal people would get very defensive, and it's very much in the interests of femininity to be tactful. Sophia, you know.
Yes, it depends how you want to do it. I think there's a place for both. I think there's a place for audacious.
Be able to withdraw gracefully.
Yes, I think there's a place for both approaches. The audacity in your face approach and the more tactful. And that comes back to Kabbalah, severity and mercy. Anyone else who finish up? Oh, no, you're finishing. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.